Seriously, Julia, you downloaded a dating app. Julia Prescott muttered to herself, slamming her laptop shut and tossing her phone onto the velvet couch of her Manhattan penthouse. The CEO of Prescott Innovations, the fastest-growing tech firm in North America, had just finished a board meeting that made her want to scream. And now, at 33, surrounded by success and silence, she'd finally cracked and downloaded the app her assistant wouldn't shut up about. She hadn't dated in years, too busy scaling her empire, too busy proving herself in boardrooms full of men who didn't take her seriously until she made her first $100 million. Now she had more money than she could spend, a skyline view, closets full of couture and absolutely no one to share it with, so yeah, she downloaded it. And swiped. Most profiles were exactly what she expected, wannabes, posers, and men who'd probably Google her net worth before asking her favorite movie. But one profile stopped her. Graham, 35, single dad, loves books, hates small talk, looking for someone real. No shirtless selfies. Just one photo him, wearing a flannel shirt, holding a little girl on his shoulders, both laughing so hard their eyes were closed. There was something disarming about it, grounded, human. She matched with him, and now, 3 days later, she was about to meet him. Julia stepped out of the black car in front of a small cafe in Brooklyn, far from her usual Michelin star circuit. No paparazzi here, no pretense. She wore jeans for the first time in 6 months and a white blouse that didn't scream CEO of a billion-dollar company. Just Julia. He was already there, sitting outside, reading. She paused. Graham was tall, broad shoulders, dark blonde hair that curled slightly at his neck, and real. No gold watch, no designer anything, just a simple man with a weathered copy of Charlotte's Web on the table beside a half-drunk coffee. "Julia," he said, standing up. His voice was deep, gentle. She smiled. Hi. They sat, talked. He didn't ask what she did, just, "What do you love doing when you're not working?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I've been working since I was 20, he chuckled. "I get that. My daughter's been my whole world since she was born. She's 6 now. Harper," Julia blinked. 6? Yeah, her mom left when Harper was 2, just me and her now. She's amazing. Wild, hilarious, stubborn. Julia's chest tightened with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Admiration. And then he asked the question that made her heart stumble. "So what do you do?" She hesitated. "I run a company. Tech, cool, like apps, something like that." He didn't press, didn't ask the name. Just nodded like she'd said she worked retail and then asked what kind of music she liked. They talked for 2 hours, about Harper, about books, about how he quit corporate life 5 years ago to work part-time at a local bookstore and have more time with his daughter. He didn't mention money once. When the check came, she instinctively reached for it. He beat her to it. "It's just coffee," he said. "Let me." "You sure?" she asked. He grinned. "You can get the next one," she laughed. "Deal." He walked her to the car. She turned to say goodbye, but he hesitated. "I don't usually do this after one date," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "But Harper's school is doing this little father-daughter dance next weekend. She asked if she could bring a cool lady too. You don't have to. But she saw your picture when I matched and said you looked like a princess." Julia blinked. "She saw my picture. She's nosy. And apparently has good taste," Julia laughed. "I'd love to come." The next Saturday, Julia found herself in a gymnasium decorated with paper streamers and glitter. Kids ran wild. Harper wore a purple dress and an explosion of glitter in her hair. When she saw Julia, she screamed and ran toward her. "You came?" "I did," Julia smiled, crouching to hug her. "Purple's my favorite color." "Mine too." Harper beamed. Graham watched them with something unreadable in his eyes, gratitude, surprise. Later, when the slow song came on, Harper dragged Graham to the dance floor, then turned to Julia. "Dance with us." They danced, in circles, laughing. Julia's heels came off somewhere in the middle of it all. And when the night ended and Harper fell asleep in the backseat of Graham's truck, Julia stood with him in the parking lot, shoes in hand. "That was one of the best nights I've had in years," she said quietly. "Me too," he said. "You're full of surprises." "Like what?" "You didn't flinch when Harper wiped cotton candy on your shirt." "She's cute, I'll allow it." He stepped closer. "I like you, Julia, but I need to know something." "Okay, are you real? Like really real? Because I've had people come and go." Harper's had people come and go, and I'm not looking for someone who's just curious. Julia swallowed hard. She wanted to say everything. To tell him that she ran an empire, that she could buy and sell this city, that she lived in a penthouse with a wine cellar bigger than most apartments. But instead, I'm here, Graham, and I don't know what this is yet, but I don't do casual. He held her gaze, then nodded. Okay, he leaned down and kissed her cheek. Good night, Julia. She watched his truck drive off, heart pounding. She'd spent years surrounded by power, money, and ambition. But for the first time in a long time, Julia Prescott felt something she couldn't buy. Connection. Julia stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, staring at the faint streak of glitter still clinging to her collarbone. Harper's enthusiastic hug had left a trail of sparkle that no amount of scrubbing seemed to fully erase. And strangely, she didn't want to, her phone buzzed on the marble nightstand. A calendar alert. Breakfast meeting with a venture capital firm at 7. She sighed, pulling her silk robe tighter around her and walking barefoot across the heated floor to her closet. The night before had done something to her. She'd spent years commanding rooms, negotiating acquisitions, and launching products that changed the market. But dancing barefoot with a 6-year-old in a gym decorated with streamers had left a stronger impression than any boardroom ever had. By the time she arrived at the restaurant the next morning, the sun had barely crept over the skyline. She stepped out of her car, nodded at the valet, and walked past a group of sharply dressed men already deep in discussion. Her assistant leaned in close as she approached. They're here early. I told them you'd be 5 minutes, Julia nodded. Let's not keep them waiting. The meeting went as expected. Proposals, projections, the usual volley of numbers and strategies, but her mind kept drifting. To Harper's lopsided ponytail. To Graham's easy laugh when he'd tried to mimic a dance move and nearly fell over. Julia, one of the investors said, breaking her reverie. Everything all right, she blinked once, then smiled with practiced ease. Of course, let's move forward with the revised term sheets. I'll have legal review them by tomorrow. The men stood, handshakes exchanged. As they left, her assistant handed her a folder. You've got a product demo at 11 and a lunch with the AI division after that. Want me to call ahead for the car? Julia glanced at the folder, then shook her head. No, push the lunch to next week. And cancel the dinner with Rami tonight. Her assistant raised an eyebrow. Should I ask why? I'm going to Brooklyn. The bookstore was tucked between a laundromat and a florist, its display window filled with hand-lettered signs and stacked paperbacks. A bell chimed when she walked in. The scent of old pages and fresh coffee floated through the air. Graham stood behind the counter, restocking a shelf. He looked up, the beginnings of a grin tugging at his lips. This is unexpected. I was in the neighborhood, Julia said, brushing a curl behind her ear. Thought I'd stop by. He set the book down and walked around the counter. You came all the way across the river for a bookstore that doesn't even serve espresso. I like tea. He tilted his head. You don't strike me as the herbal type. I'm not. But I make exceptions. He gestured to a small reading nook near the window. Have a seat. Harper's at school for another couple hours. She sat and he brought over 2 mugs. Theirs brushed briefly as he handed one to her. She took a sip, wincing. This is terrible, he laughed. Told you. It's chamomile. No one really likes it. Then why do you serve it? Because this place is run on sentiment, not quality control. Julia looked around. The mismatched chairs, the faded posters, the handwritten labels on every shelf. It was the opposite of the polished minimalism she was used to, and it was oddly comforting. Do you ever miss it? She asked. Miss what? The pace, the ambition, the pressure. He leaned back, stretching his arms over the back of the chair. Sometimes, but I don't miss who I was back then. I was always tired, always distracted. I'd call home and forget what city I was in. It cost me a lot. He didn't elaborate. He didn't have to. Julia stared down at her tea. I built everything from nothing. I was broke at 21 and a millionaire by 25. But lately I look around and wonder what I'm actually doing with any of it. Graham studied her. You ever take a day off? She smiled dryly. Define off. No emails, no meetings, no calls. Then no, you should try it. She looked up. What would I even do? Come with us this weekend. Harper and I are going upstate. There's a cabin by the lake, no Wi-Fi, just woods, water, and her trying to catch frogs. Julia paused. You're inviting me to a frog hunting weekend, he grinned. That's exactly what I'm inviting you to. I don't even own sneakers. I'll lend you mine, she laughed despite herself. All right. But if I fall in the lake, I'm blaming you. Deal. That weekend, Julia stood on the porch of the small cabin, watching Harper dart across the grass with a tin bucket and an oversized sun hat. Graham emerged from inside, holding 2 mugs of something that smelled marginally better than bookstore tea. I made coffee, the real kind. She took the mug gratefully. Thank you, Harper screamed from the edge of the lake. I found one, it's huge. Julia looked at Graham. Should we be worried? Not unless she brings it inside. They walked down the slope toward the water, shoes sinking slightly into the soft earth. Julia squatted beside Harper, peering into the bucket. That's definitely a frog. Isn't he amazing? Harper beamed. He's a little slimy, but sure. As the sun dipped lower, painting the lake in streaks of amber and rose, they sat on a blanket with sandwiches and lemonade. Julia leaned back on her elbows, watching Harper skip stones with intense concentration. She really loves you, she said quietly. She's my whole world. You're lucky. He turned to her. So are you. You just haven't let anyone in. Julia looked away. That's not fair. Maybe not, but it's true. The air grew still between them. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I know how to run companies. I know how to negotiate billion-dollar deals, but I don't know how to be soft or open or whatever this is. He reached out, brushing her fingers with his. You don't have to know everything, you just have to be willing. She met his eyes. And for the first time, didn't feel the urge to retreat. Graham's pickup rolled slowly into the city, the early Sunday evening light casting long shadows over the brownstone-lined streets. Harper, asleep in the backseat again, clutched a stuffed rabbit she'd insisted on naming Princess CEO. Julia smiled to herself as she glanced back at her, then returned her gaze to the road ahead. She insisted, Graham said, catching her expression. Said the rabbit needed a title of power. Julia laughed under her breath. At least she didn't name it after a frog. He pulled to the curb outside the bookstore. You want to come in? I've got half a pie left, and Harper will want to say goodbye properly when she wakes up. Sure, she said, unbuckling. But only if I can convince her to let me take Princess CEO for a board meeting tomorrow. Inside, the bookstore was quiet and warm, dim lamps casting golden light over the shelves. Graham unlocked the side door to the apartment above and led the way up. It was small, the ceiling slanted, but it was full of color and life drawings taped to the fridge, a row of tiny boots by the door, a half-finished puzzle on the coffee table. He disappeared into the kitchen. Julia wandered to the bookshelf in the corner, running her fingers over the spines. A photo caught her eye, Graham holding Harper, both of them drenched in what looked like rain, laughing uncontrollably. She could see the edges of a city skyline in the background, faded through mist. That was last spring, he said, entering with 2 plates and a steaming kettle. Got caught in a downpour on the walk home. She insisted it was the best day of her life. She's going to be the kind of woman who grows up chasing storms, Julia said softly. She already is. They sat at the small kitchen table, the pie rich with cinnamon and butter. Julia took a bite, then raised an eyebrow. You made this. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not. I'm just recalibrating everything I thought I knew about you. He poured tea into mismatched mugs. Let me guess you assumed I lived on freezer meals and Harper's leftover chicken nuggets. I assumed you were the kind of man who didn't have time to make crust from scratch. I don't, he said, nodding toward the sink. That took 2 hours and 4 minor burns. She laughed, then leaned back. You ever think about what comes next? He watched her quietly. You mean this, us? She nodded. I think about it constantly, he said. But I also think you're used to things that move fast. Deals, projects, people, and I'm not that. I can't be that. She met his eyes. What if I don't want fast anymore? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood and walked to a drawer, pulling something out. He came back and placed a folded sheet of paper in front of her. What's this? It's Harper's homework. They had to draw who they considered their hero. She drew you. Julia unfolded the paper. Crayon lines formed a figure in a skirt suit holding a laptop in one hand and Harper's hand in the other. Above it, in uneven handwriting, my hero Julia, who came to the dance and doesn't mind frogs. Her throat tightened. "I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I've barely known her a week. She doesn't care. She trusts fast. I don't, but I'm trying." Julia folded the paper carefully and set it down. "I meant what I said by the lake. I don't know how to do slow. But I'm willing to try too." Footsteps padded down the hallway before either of them could say more. Harper appeared, hair sticking up in all directions, dragging Princess CEO by one ear. "You're still here," she said sleepily. "I wanted to say goodbye." Harper wrapped her arms around Julia's waist and squeezed. "Can you come back tomorrow?" "I wish I could, but I have to work." "Then Tuesday, we'll see." Harper thought for a moment. "You should just work here." Julia looked at Graham, who tried and failed to hide a laugh. "That's not how it works, kiddo," he said. "I could be your boss," Harper offered. "You and Daddy could share the bookstore and I'll tell people where the good books are." Julia kissed the top of her head. "You'd be the best boss I've ever had." When Harper returned to bed, Graham walked her to the front door. The city outside was buzzing again, headlights sweeping down the street. She hesitated on the step. "I have to fly to San Francisco this week," he nodded. "For long, 3 days. Maybe 4. Okay," she searched his face. "You're not going to ask me not to go?" "No," he said simply. "I'm not in the business of asking people to shrink their world. I just want to be part of it when you let me." The words sank into her like warmth. "Can I call you when I land?" "You can call me whenever you want." She leaned in, kissed him. Not a hesitant brush, but something fuller, something that left her hands trembling when she pulled away. "I'll see you soon," she whispered. He watched her go, standing barefoot in the doorway as she disappeared into the night. That week, Julia's days were a blur of panels, pitches, and endless applause. But every night, she slipped from dinners and speeches to call Graham. They didn't talk about Harper or work. They talked about everything else, the things that didn't make it into headlines or quarterly reports. On the last night, she stood on the hotel balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly below. "You ever think about leaving it?" she asked. "The bookstore, the whole thing, the city. The structure, the pace." "I used to," he said. "Now I just want to build something better inside it." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "When I get back, I want to show you something." "What is it?" "It's not a thing, it's a choice." And when she hung up, she didn't go to sleep. She opened her laptop, found the file she'd been avoiding, and began writing the email that would change everything. Julia stepped into her office the following Monday with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. This wasn't about acquisition strategy or quarterly growth. This was about something far bigger: her life. She passed the glass conference room where her executive team waited, their voices hushed as they noticed her arrival. Every Monday morning began the same way: a full rundown of company operations, projections, and investor updates. But today, she walked past the room without a word and headed straight into her private office. Her assistant followed, confused. "Julia, they're waiting." "Give me 15 minutes, she said, unbuttoning the cuffs of her blouse and rolling them up as she walked toward the cabinet near the window. The decision she'd made in San Francisco had taken root, and now it grew with every breath. She retrieved a sealed envelope from the top drawer and handed it to her assistant. "Schedule a company-wide meeting for Friday afternoon. I'll make the announcement myself, but this memo needs to be prepped for distribution just after." Her assistant opened it, scanned the contents, then looked up with wide eyes. "You're stepping down," Julia nodded once. "I'm transitioning into an advisory role. The board will elevate Carmen to interim CEO until the vote. She's ready." The assistant stood there, stunned. "You've built this for over a decade." "I know exactly what I built. But if I stay, I'll keep trying to fill something that this company was never meant to fix." She turned back toward the window, the skyline stretching in sharp angles beyond the glass. "I need a life that feels like it belongs to me." That evening, she traded her power suit for a soft sweater and jeans, then stopped at a bakery on her way to Brooklyn. She picked out a box of cinnamon buns and a jar of strawberry jam, remembering Harper's enthusiastic description of her favorite breakfast in the whole universe. When she arrived at the bookstore, the lights were still on. Through the window, she saw Harper coloring behind the counter while Graham rang up a customer. The bell jingled as she stepped inside. Harper looked up and lit up. "You came back. I brought pastries," Julia said, lifting the box. Harper ran over, arms out. "You brought jam too." "I sure did." As Graham finished with the customer, he glanced over and smiled, not the cautious, testing smile from those first few days, but something warmer, trusting. They sat in the back of the store, Harper chattering about her class trip to the aquarium and how she'd seen a jellyfish that looked exactly like Daddy's hair when he wakes up. Graham laughed, and Julia watched him, feeling the last of her reservations dissolve. After Harper fell asleep upstairs, Julia helped Graham close up. He wiped down the counter while she stacked the last of the returned books. "You look lighter," he said, watching her. "I feel it." "What happened?" "I'm stepping down," she said. "Not from everything. Just from being the person I thought I had to be all the time." He leaned against the counter, arms folded. "What changed?" "You did," she said softly. "You and Harper, you showed me how full life can be when it isn't built on constant motion." He didn't speak right away. "Then you're sure?" She nodded. "I've never been surer." He walked toward her slowly, stopping only when they were inches apart. "You scare me sometimes." "Why?" "Because you walk into a room and shift the entire temperature." "Because I didn't mean to fall in love with you, and now I can't imagine what my life looks like without you in it." She took his hand. "Then don't imagine it, just live it." His lips found hers in a kiss that was quieter than the first, but deeper, more certain. There was no hesitation now, no line between them left uncrossed. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I want to build something new, not alone, with you," he nodded. "We will." The weeks that followed unfolded like scenes from a life she hadn't known she was allowed to dream about. Julia still advised the company once a week, by video call, but her days were no longer defined by status updates and stock fluctuations. She spent mornings in the bookstore helping Harper pick out seasonal display books, afternoons walking through Prospect Park hand in hand with Graham, and evenings cooking dinner in the tiny kitchen above the shop. She bought a brownstone nearby, not a penthouse, not a fortress in the clouds, but a home. A real one, with bookshelves already built into the living room and a sunlit kitchen that Harper promptly claimed for her baking experiments. One evening, Graham invited her to the rooftop of the building. She followed him up the narrow stairs, confused, until she stepped out and saw what he'd done, string lights draped from one side to the other. A small table with 2 chairs sat in the center, a chilled bottle of wine resting in an ice bucket, and an envelope with her name written across it in Harper's handwriting. She opened it. Inside was a drawing. 3 figures, one tall, one medium, one small, all holding hands, above them a heart. And under it, one word, misspelled but perfect, family. She looked up, her throat tight. Graham was already kneeling. "I don't have a yacht or a private island or 10,000 shares of anything. But I have a daughter who adores you, a bookstore that somehow always smells like cinnamon, and a heart that's never belonged to anyone else." She laughed through her tears. "You're proposing with crayons. I'm proposing with the only thing that matters. Us." She dropped to her knees in front of him and kissed him fiercely. "Yes. 1,000,000 times, yes." 2 months later, they married in the garden behind the bookstore, surrounded by a patchwork crowd of friends, family, neighbors, and one very determined flower girl who insisted on carrying a clipboard to make sure the ceremony ran on time. Julia wore a simple ivory dress with Harper's drawing stitched into the lining. Graham wore the same flannel shirt from his dating app profile under his suit jacket, claiming it was lucky. As they said their vows, the wind picked up, scattering petals and laughter through the air. And when Harper ran up afterward, hugging them both and yelling, "We did it!" Julia realized something that made her chest ache with joy. She hadn't just fallen in love, she'd found what she'd been building toward all along, a life. A family, a love that no amount of money could ever buy. The scent of fresh paint lingered faintly in the air as Julia stood in the center of the new space, sunlight streaming through the tall windows and catching against the brushed gold fixtures. Where there had once been a forgotten storefront next to the bookstore, a dusty, shuttered bakery, there now stood a warm, inviting cafe with soft sage walls, honey wood floors, and a name printed in white cursive across the glass: Harper & Co. Julia adjusted the vase of peonies on the counter just as Graham walked in with Harper balanced on his hip, her hair in two impossibly uneven braids and a clipboard in her hand. "She says there's a problem with the menu board," he said, setting her down gently. "You spelled strawberry wrong," Harper declared, hopping onto a stool and swinging her feet. "It only has one R in the middle." Julia leaned over and kissed her forehead. "Then thank goodness you're in charge," Graham chuckled and moved behind the counter. "You sure about this opening next week? There's still time to delay if you're not ready." "I'm sure," Julia said, sliding a tray of mugs into place. "We've got everything we need. A good espresso machine, people who care. And a 6-year-old with a clipboard." 7 next month, Harper reminded, spinning her stool. "Don't rush it," Graham said. "I still haven't recovered from your last birthday party." Julia walked to the window, gazing out at the quiet street. The idea for the cafe had come not long after the wedding, when she and Graham realized the vacant shop next door could be more than just extra storage. It could be theirs, a space where books met coffee, where the community could gather, and where Julia could create something new on her own terms. She didn't miss the boardrooms. She didn't miss the skyline. She didn't miss the constant performance of being the sharpest person in the room. She had traded it for something slower, something fuller, and she had never breathed more freely. Later that evening, after Harper had fallen asleep under her canopy of fairy lights and stuffed animals, Graham joined Julia in the backyard, where they'd strung up a hammock between 2 posts and planted lavender along the fence line. The scent drifted lightly in the breeze as he handed her a blanket and sat beside her on the swing. "She's going to be a force," Julia murmured, tucking her legs beneath her. "She already is. But now she's got someone to show her how to turn it into something beautiful." Julia looked over. "I didn't know I wanted this." "I did," he said. "The minute you walked into that cafe in jeans and looked like you were about to run back to Manhattan if I said the wrong thing. I almost did." He kissed her temple. "But you didn't. And now you've built something no one else could have imagined." She leaned into him. "You know what the best part is? Tell me. I don't need to prove anything anymore, not to anyone, not even myself." Graham wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "That's the most powerful thing you've ever said." They sat in silence for a while, the sounds of the neighborhood soft around them, the distant bark of a dog, the hum of a passing car, the creak of the hammock as it swayed. "I've been thinking," he said after a long pause, "about expanding the bookstore's children's section. Harper's been drawing up ideas." "She pitched them to me yesterday," Julia said. "She wants beanbags shaped like vegetables." "Of course she does. And she wants a weekly story time. But only if she gets to pick the first book." "She's already the creative director," Graham said, laughing. "Next she'll be reviewing the profit margins." Julia turned toward him, brushing her fingers along the collar of his shirt. "You really think we can do all this? Run a bookstore, a cafe, raise a child with a clipboard, and still find time to just be us?" "I think we already are," he said. "And I think it's only going to get better." She kissed him then, gently, then deeper, the kind of kiss that didn't need urgency or promise. It simply was real, rooted, and steady. The next morning, Julia woke early and padded barefoot into the kitchen. She brewed coffee, added just a bit of cinnamon, something Graham had started doing that she'd grown to love, and carried 2 mugs back upstairs. He was still half asleep, one arm flung over his eyes as she nudged his shoulder. "You want to come see something?" she asked. He blinked at her, groggy. "At 6:30 in the morning," she smiled. "Trust me." Minutes later, wrapped in blankets, they stood on the roof of the brownstone as the sun crept over the tops of the buildings. The city stretched in soft gold and pink, rooftops glinting with dew. "This is the first time I've watched the sunrise without feeling like I had to conquer the day," Julia whispered. "That's because you've already won," Graham said, his hand finding hers. They watched in silence as the sky opened, the light spilling slowly over their little corner of Brooklyn. A year passed. Harper & Co. became a neighborhood favorite. Locals came for the pastries and stayed for the books. Parents brought their toddlers to story time, where Harper proudly read from her favorite titles and corrected anyone who mispronounced anything. Julia found herself in the rhythm of a life that no longer demanded perfection, only presence. She still consulted occasionally, but only when it felt right. Her days were filled with the warmth of community. the joy of building something meaningful, and the quiet, steady love of a man who had never tried to change her, only invited her to belong. On the anniversary of the cafe's opening, Graham surprised her with a small celebration in the backyard. String lights, soft music, and a hand-painted sign from Harper that read, "1 year of better." As the evening wound down, Julia stood in the center of the garden, Harper dancing nearby with a cupcake in each hand, and Graham holding her from behind. "Remember when you asked me if I was real?" she said quietly. He kissed the side of her neck. "I remember. I didn't know how to answer then, but I do now." He turned her gently toward him, and she looked up at him, eyes bright. "This is as real as it gets." They kissed as the laughter of their daughter filled the air around them, the lights above swaying gently in the breeze. And in that moment, surrounded by everything they'd built, Julia knew without doubt, without fear, that she hadn't just found love. She had found home,